Welcome, Gunrunner.
Originally known as the Acorn Proton, the BBC Micro was initially conceived as a replacement for the rather limited Acorn Atom computer. The final version of the machine actually came about due to the BBC Computer Literacy Project, where it beat off the aggressive advances of Sinclair Research to win the contract and appear in schools across the UK. Released in 1981, the price of the machine was well out of reach for most households of the time, but its presence in schools not only helped convince better off families to make the investment, but also meant a rather large audience of children got to experience the machine firsthand. This makes the BBC Micro extremely unique, a system that many people have huge amounts of nostalgia for despite never having owned one. I'm definitely one of these people, although my next door neighbour actually had a BBC Master, so I did get to play that on a regular basis too. This is probably the reason why I got such a huge amount of votes for this video, far more than I expected, which makes this list even more interesting I feel. As with previous greatest of all time videos, I put this question to members of several big retro gaming groups on Facebook, including the hugely popular and very lively Retro Gaming Hysteria, link in the description for those who want to join, as well as my own loyal subscribers, asking them to name their top 5 and the reasons why. Following the same rules as before, I awarded 5 points to your first choice, 4 points to second, and so on and so forth. I then counted up those votes to decide the final placings. Now usually I read out how I decided tiebreakers here, but for the first time ever in one of these videos I didn't have any at all within the top 20. Although I did have plenty in the wider top 40, which as always will be a Patreon exclusive video at the start of next month. There were actually a lot of interesting things to pick out about this video. Firstly, the absence of some really big name titles, particularly official arcade conversions, although there are plenty of unofficial ones. Big name titles like Paperboy, Star Wars, Tapper, Spy Hunter, Robotron 2084, Asteroids, Hypersports, Hunchback and Yar Kung Fu didn't get a single vote, and many other computer classics that featured in videos for many of the BBC's rivals like Beachhead, Boulder Dash, Bruce Lee, Impossible Mission and Saberwolf didn't make it either. Perhaps it's because these games were all ports as opposed to BBC originals. Perhaps that says a lot about how loyal and passionate the BBC owners are. Although the absence of some of these titles did surprise me, the games I saw at the top of the charts certainly didn't, and I'm guessing that most of you could pick them, but I won't give away any spoilers just in case you're still in the dark. But that's enough pontificating over the finer points of this video and the voting process, and now it's time to get on with the show, as I proudly present the 20 greatest BBC Micro games of all time.
This is the story of Daphne, who longs to be alone with her very own BBC Micro. Alas for Daphne, Acorn have also made it rather attractive to small businessmen.
Hello, Dad.
Tragically, they've even made it irresistible to accountants.
Hello, Uncle Cyril.
Just go in.
And sad to say, it's become vital for everyone who needs up-to-the-minute information, thanks to its Prestel and teletext adapters. Worst of all, it's absolutely bung-ho for busy administrators. And then there are those visitors who want to use its unearthly scientific potential. Poor Daphne. The BBC microcomputer system is a world leader, and it's still growing.
I've always been really impressed by Starship Command, because if you didn't know any better you'd swear that it was a port of an arcade game. Such is the brilliance of its fast-paced, high-score focused gameplay. It probably deserved to be higher on this list, but I'm pleased it made the top 20 anyway. Originally released in the arcades in 1981, Donkey Kong was Nintendo's first big hit and introduced us to not only a big angry ape, but also to a rather rotund Italian known originally as Jumpman. Whilst the Beeb didn't get an official port of the game, it did get this remarkably accurate clone. I was really intrigued when I saw Raven Skull on the list, because I wasn't previously aware of it, and it's always great to discover classic games I missed out on. Sometimes compared to the hit Atari arcade game Gauntlet, Raven Skull is a lot more focused on the adventuring aspects. It has to be said that there aren't many run and gun games on the Beeb, so Striker's Run is a welcome addition to the library, especially as it's a system exclusive. It's also one of the few games on this list that benefits massively from being played on a BBC Master. I think it's fair to say that if you went to junior school in the UK in the mid to late 80s, then you played Granny's Garden. I'm also willing to bet that you absolutely loved it, mainly because it was a huge escape from all the other boring stuff you did at school, which is probably why it's still so loved. Okay, so they didn't even try to hide what game they were cloning here. Yes, Zalaga is a copy of Namco's Galaga, the amazing sequel to the groundbreaking Galaxian, and one of the very earliest examples out there of what we now know as a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up. Though it very much borrowed the gameplay mechanics of the popular Atari arcade game Gravitar, Thrust very much expanded on the concept by introducing us to things like the need to collect fuel and rescue pods. It never really clicked with me, but you all seem to love it. In this really unique arcade adventure, you play the part of a wizard trying to escape an underground lair that he's become trapped inside of. You select your character and what objects you want to use using the icons and a pointer in the top control panel. Very innovative for the time. Without doubt one of the most famous clones of Universal's Mr. Do arcade game, Mr. E is so close to the classic coin-op, but they were lucky not to get sued. Thankfully it managed to fly under the radar, so we all got to play this brilliant dig 'em up to our heart's content. Designed by the legendary Eugene Jarvis, released by Williams in 1980, Defender has to rank as one of the greatest arcade games of all time. This renamed BBC Micro port might be far from official, but it's as accurate a conversion as you're going to find on an early 8-bit micro. Such was the likeness of Acorn Soft's unofficial Pac-Man to the original arcade game, they got threatened with a lawsuit by Atari, who owned the home rights at the time, causing them to change the name and rename it to Snapper. That similarity is still very clear to see, however. Rarely do you see a game that announces itself like this one. No box art of any kind, just a bold statement proclaiming it as probably the most challenging game you'll ever play for the BBC Micro. Thankfully the game very much lived up to the hype, which is why it makes the top 10. Of all the games released for the BBC, there are a few with a reputation as high as Nick Pelling's Stone Age platformer, Frack. The game was so successful that it was later ported to the Commodore 64 and received numerous re-releases too, but this is where it all started. Repton was often labelled, rather unfairly I may add, as a Boulder Dash clone, but its gameplay was actually a lot more strategic and cerebral. This third game built on what came before by adding an absolutely brilliant level editor that made sure it would never get boring. Outside of games for systems I personally owned, there are very few titles that stick in my mind as much as Citadel. The biggest reason for this is the booming speech you hear when the game boots up. Thankfully the arcade adventure gameplay more than matches up to the amazing intro. I think anyone with an interest in retro gaming, and especially driving games, is more than aware of the legendary Jeff Crammond. But long before the likes of Formula 1 Grand Prix and Stunt Car Racer, he created the hugely impressive and highly playable Revs for the BBC. Created by Peter Irvin, programmer of Starship Command, and Jeremy Smith of Thrust fame, Exile is often cited as one of the earliest examples of a Metroidvania game and is a true hidden gem for the BBC Micro that offers some incredibly deep and involving gameplay. Certain gaming characters have become synonymous with specific systems over the years, often being called mascots. Sega has Sonic the Hedgehog, Nintendo has Mario, and Acorn have Repton, a character you love so much he appears for the second time in this countdown. When it comes to 8-bit platformers for the home computers, there are very few titles more famous than the seminal Chuckie Egg, especially on the BBC, where you ranked this game above the likes of Manic Miner, Lode Runner and Jet Set Willy to award it our runner-up. Let's face it, there was only ever going to be one winner in this poll, and that is the groundbreaking space exploration game Elite. Ian Bell and David Braben's masterpiece originated on the Beeb and very much showed off the huge power of Acorn's computer in the process.
The average schoolchild hasn't really changed much over the years. But school has. The computer has arrived. Under a government scheme, schools all over Britain are introducing microcomputers, and they're choosing one in particular, made by Acorn. As a result, the language it uses, called BBC Basic, has become the acknowledged computer language for schools. And now parents can catch up. For Acorn have produced a micro for the home that also uses BBC Basic. It's called the Electron. It's powerful, it's versatile, and it's only £199. So now your children can teach you all they know. The Acorn Electron can be found at larger W.H. Smith's or your local Acorn dealer. Just call 200 0200 for your nearest stockist.
And that rounds out my look at the 20 greatest BBC micro games of all time. But which games were you most surprised not to see make the final list? Or are there any games that you don't think were worthy of inclusion in this countdown? I always love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons and YouTube backers for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following people in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Paul Daniel, Mins, Lost Gamerman, Luke MC, Carl Olsen, Seth Robinson, Grady Haynes, Mark Strickland, Clibbertorn, Trogdor the Birdinator, Daniel Skrodsky, Ben P. Stein, Tabby Kitsune, Alan J. Dodds, Your Eyes Are Bleeding, and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to host extra content, including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights, and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.